Welcome to Buddhist Daily. This is our Buddhist question series. I'm Tal, your host, and here to answer your questions is Lama Dawa. How you doing, Lama?
I'm good. Thank you, Tal. How are you?
Very good, very good. We have a meditation series, and we also do 2-minute videos where we go through Buddhist quotes and explain them. You can visit us at youtube.com/at Buddhist Daily. You can submit your questions below in the comment section, and I'll get to the question right now. If there's no self, how do we explain why we feel like there is a self and what gets. Well, let's start with that. Why do we feel like there is a self?
Well, that's an excellent question and gets to the heart of some pretty deep Buddhist philosophy. So, first of all, we could say that first and foremost, Buddhism is what we call a non-theistic um, spiritual path. Theism posits a God, something external, something lasting and solid and real. Uh, and along the lines of theism, we also talk about a soul or a personal existing self. And Buddhism is, the Buddha was quite a radical, and his enlightenment, what he saw, what he understood, was that this idea of a self, this feeling of a self that we all have, is an illusion in a sense. What we mean by that is if we look really deeply, really hard, if we really scrutinize uh, and investigate who am I, and we look very deeply in a very profound way, we come up empty handed. There is nothing we can actually point to and find. This is radical. It does go against our sort of intuitive, common sense of, oh, well, here I am. Of course I exist. When my bladder's full, I have to go to the bathroom. When I'm tired, I have to sleep. When I'm hungry, I have to eat. This is me. And I've had this life, and I have these parents, and I've had this country I live in, and I like this kind of music and ice cream. These are the things that define me. So of course I exist. So this notion of what we call in Buddhism non-self is very interesting, and it's a lot to talk about because much of this is experiential. And in the stages of meditation, we do start with calming the mind, getting the mind clear, and learning how to stay present in a way that we are not indulging in the distractions that are always coming up in our mind. So when we have a mind that's calm and very focused and present, then in different Buddhist meditational traditions and practices, we look at our own mind with our mind. We look at the self. We examine and, as I said, scrutinize. Like we look, okay, we're doing an investigation. How do I exist? So maybe we don't even start with, do I exist as a self? Because we already know that we exist on some level. Buddhism's not saying we don't exist. It's saying we don't exist in the way that we normally think that we exist. We take this sense of self as something really real and solid and unchanging. And clearly, as we go through life, of course, our body changes, our circumstances changes. But when we look deeply at who am I, who is meditating, who is having this experience, it's quite slippery. It's very elusive. Ultimately, we can never find something that we can say, this is me. This is me. And it's something that is always with me. So What we do have, though, is a process of change that occurs constantly, and the mind that is not, let's say, completely enlightened and uh, understanding deeply about this emptiness, this mind is um, deluded or is confused a little bit. So there is an openness. When we talk about the mind, there's this open state that we refer to as emptiness. Emptiness, openness, kind of a combination of those senses. Something that is ongoing, some experience that's ongoing, and yet very much, as we know, interdependent, conditioned by other things, nothing that stands alone by itself in an unchanging way. So the definition of a soul or a self is something that is just there and unchanging. And this doesn't seem to actually really exist. What happens is an unfolding of patterns and different habitual patterns and tendencies that repeat themselves. And we mistakenly attribute a sense of self to this pattern of unfolding. This is obviously not an easy thing to talk about, because even when we use the word we have this pattern in the English language, which is very dualistic, it makes us think, okay, well, you're saying there's a we, there's a me here. So that's a relative convention. This is important. So let's say something very clear here about Buddhism. We talk about two truths. Two truths. Truth is something that is true. We have what we call relative truth. Relative truth means if the sun is shining and the sky is blue, then that's a relative truth. That's a sunny day. Things that just happen in our life, in our interactions with people, in our inner landscape of feelings and emotions, that's relative truth. It's relatively true. All this is true. It's true that if I'm hungry, I need to eat something, or I need to sleep if I'm tired. It's relatively true. But there's also something called ultimate truth. So we have relative truth and ultimate truth. Ultimately, this is what we're talking about when we talk about non-self. This is a statement about ultimate truth. Ultimately, this idea of a self breaks down when we really examine deeply, when we really look, and we try to pinpoint or say, if a self really exists in an ultimate sense, then it should be findable. It should be something that we can isolate and say something about. And yet, it seems that we cannot. Now, I'm talking about what the Buddha said himself and enlightened beings. I am not one of those beings. So I'm only reporting what I have heard and read and intuitively understand to some degree. But this is the journey for each of us, is to deepen our understanding of the relationship even of relative truth and ultimate truth. You could say they coexist. We say that ultimate truth, if we say, well, there's no self, nothing exists really, well, that's fine to say that, but we cannot negate relative truth. So we don't negate relative truth by holding ultimate truth. By the same token, we don't uphold relative truth to the point where it negates ultimate truth. So we have both of these. This is why Buddhism is called the middle path, the middle way. If we say everything exists, the self exists, there's a soul, there's a God, that's an extreme. It's an extreme because it doesn't actually hold up in the light of ultimate truth. So holding to relative truth is an extreme. At the same time, holding to ultimate truth you could say, is also an extreme. So balance and a sense of a really large mind that can hold the whole picture, the whole shebang. And so we have relative truth and ultimate truth, both together. This is called wisdom when we understand these things. Relative truth is the world of cause and effect. That's what we call, of course, karma. It means everything that happens in the relative world, the relative plane of existence, everything that happens has causes. Things don't happen. This means things don't just happen spontaneously or randomly or without any cause. Everything has some kind of a cause. And every cause has some kind of consequence or result. So again, we talk about in Buddhism a lot about cause and effect. This is the basis, again, of the basic, very important concept in Buddhism of karma. And because of karma and the understanding of cause and effect, that informs a Buddhist practitioner's behavior and has a lot to do with mindfulness. So we're paying attention. Why are we paying attention? Because things we do matter. Things have consequences. And ultimately, if we go back to the sort of the foundational teaching of the Buddha, it's about the Four Noble Truths, right? Which is fundamentally, this is about the existential dilemma of beings, of suffering, dissatisfaction, stress, anxiety, worries, concerns, all of it. So with a strong understanding of both relative and ultimate truth, we make, you could say, more informed decisions about how we behave, act, and think. And we use mindfulness as the principal way to tune into these things and pay attention. So that's extremely important. When we get to sort of further stages of meditation, we can start to work more with understanding ultimate truth. And I always say this has to be experiential, not something reading about ultimate truth in Buddhist philosophical books. There's plenty of that. And yes, it's helpful because it can kind of steer us in the right direction. It can take us to the edge of the cliff. But ultimate truth is kind of taking a leap off of the cliff, off the precipice, and diving into the experience of ultimate truth, which comes, again, this is the development of wisdom in meditation practice, where we are looking deeply. And then at some point, especially in what we call Mahamudra style practice or Dzogchen, these are terms that we use in Tibetan Buddhism, one lets go. Concepts are actually in the realm of relative truth. They may be being applied to try to understand ultimate truth, but to be clear, anything that's in the conceptual mind, we could say the mind of dualism, the mind of the intellect, the mind of trying to seek and understand things, striving and trying to crack the code and understand what's going on, that is relative truth. So in Mahamudra and Dzogchen style meditation, we actually take that leap, meaning we just let go of our thoughts. We let go of the thinking process. We let go of trying to, quote, understand what's going on. And we can experience just the sort of natural state of the mind in its, you could say, pure nature. And that is kind of moving into what we call the realm of ultimate truth, which is, again, a non-verbal, non-conceptual, non-intellectual kind of understanding. So this is kind of just a beginning conversation about a very, very vast and deep, very profound topic that you brought up. So maybe not say too much more about it at this point. It might lead to more confusion than answers. But hopefully this shines a little spotlight and gives our viewers a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. This is something that can be explored in further detail later. But we do have a strong intuitive sense of I exist. And again, what I'm trying to be clear about here is we do exist relatively. Ultimately, no.
Okay, I like that. It makes sense. While you were talking about all that, I took some notes about what I was thinking with what you were saying, and the way I interpreted some of it was the subjective mind is that relative truth, and ultimate truth is an objective truth, and is a universal consciousness, maybe. I mean, you can correct me where I'm wrong here, which is always present, but the subjective mind is clouded or blocked to the ultimate objective truth. My follow-up question actually had to do with the afterlife, or rather reincarnation. How can we be reincarnated if there is no self, right? I almost think of it, if I understood properly, it's like more like a process patterns, because it's always changing. But is it like I think of it almost in like a computer or tech terms, like a packet which has all kinds of other things in it that are, it's not one, even though the packet itself is one thing.
Okay, very good, very, very good. The especially the first part, I think we strayed off a little bit later philosophically, but the beginning, what you talked about, subjective and objective self, subjective self being more the relative, and sort of this sense of objective truth being ultimate. That's good. I absolutely agree. I think that's pretty much along the right lines. When we start talking about packets of truth and what reincarnates, now we're in another realm.
Or like packets of self is what I meant. Like, so like, because from a reincarnate, I'm just hard to like understand the reincarnation process.
Right.
With the lack of self.
Well, clearly you could say something reincarnates. Now the question, I guess, becomes, what is that reincarnates? Is it something solid and real, or is it a process of habits that have been set in motion that just continue? Sort of like physics, right? I think it's Newtonian physics, the law of entropy. Something in motion tends to stay in motion. So in terms of cause and effect, a thought of consciousness, or a consciously derived thought, will lead to another consciously derived thought. It can't lead to something that's not in the same pattern. So what reincarnates? Patterns of confusion. We don't have to say that there is some unchanging self at the core of that pattern of continued habitual tendencies or patterns. So something continues, some energy, you could say, continues. But it's, from a sort of orthodox Buddhist point of view, it's incorrect to say that that's actually a soul or a self. It's a continuation of patterns, if that makes sense. You can deconstruct, and this is kind of what I was getting at before, in terms of certain Buddhist meditation practices where we talk about applying a certain kind of mindfulness, or a scrutinizing of who am I, what is the self, what are thoughts made of, and even what is the external world, does it really exist separate from me? All of this kind of investigation is really important as part of this whole process. When we look, again, if we cannot come up with a soul or a self, you cannot find something that you can hold in your hand or pinpoint or say, there it is. But there is an unfolding pattern of karmic tendencies that we perpetuate, just as we do in this life. As we're alive in this body, we continually do the same sort of things, and it's always reinforcing, self-reinforcing. So when we talk about reincarnation, again, this is a whole nother can of worms, but we do know some things. Well, what do we know? We have a physical form. Is consciousness uh, dependent or in this physical form? If the physical form dies, there's no consciousness in that body. This is physical. The consciousness and is separate or different. They depend on each other while we're alive, but physical is physical. Mental or consciousness is different. And it's like when we dream. Very, very good analogy. When we dream, the physical form is laying inert in our bed, and yet our mind is continuing with thoughts and stories and all kinds of dramas and things that are occurring. So clearly, consciousness functions in a sense independently of the body. So the dream state is a very useful analogy and often used in Buddhist teaching for what happens with death. So we can think of it like that death is a form of dreaming, even. But something continues. When we die and the body dies, does that mean the mind dies also? Materialists might say yes. It's like a flame being blown out. But the Buddha said, no, it's not like that. The consciousness and the body separate when we die, and then conscious tendencies have a further experience that's independent of this physical form, this physical body, and goes through, and this is kind of mapped out, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in great detail, of the process of what happens after the physical form dies, what happens to mind. What happens to mind? What does mind experience? It seems to experience, goes through kind of its own dream, its own unfolding journey of experiences, disembodied, however. So it's kind of like that.
I like that. Yeah, that's great. It's good stuff. That journey that's a whole long conversation that I would love to have as well.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep that in mind for the future. Thank you for watching Buddhist Daily. Please submit your questions in the comment section below or topics that you'd like us to talk about. And thank you, Lama Dawa.
Thank you, Tal, for hosting this. This is very profound questions tonight. I hope that the viewers find this of some benefit. And please, yes, we do encourage you, submit questions about your meditation practice, about anything you would like more clarification on. And Buddhism is here to help us to really understand our situation. As we say, the existential dilemma of being a human being with all its beauty and trials and tribulations. So it's here to help us. The tools of meditation are extremely beneficial and very, very powerful, profound, and helpful. So love to share this with everybody. So thank you all for your patience, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Please like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends and family. See you next time.